Ms. Joy Pullmann is a research fellow at the Heartland Institute and managing editor of School Reform News, a national monthly publication. Previously, she was assistant editor of American Magazine at the American Enterprise Institute. Ms. Pullmann, welcome to Kentucky via Skype.
Well, thank you very much for letting me come to you today, especially by Skype. I'm a mother of 3 small children, and the littlest is 3 months, and he does not travel well, so this is really wonderful for me. And I also wanted to thank Senator Katie Stein for her invitation to speak today. As you mentioned, I work for the Heartland Institute. It is a state-focused national think tank whose mission is to research and promote ideas that empower individuals. Because we believe in academic freedom at Heartland, I don't speak for everyone at the Institute. Specifically named Next Generation Science Standards. In the media, you probably know that they heavily push global warming and evolution. And we don't even need to get into those religious and scientific debates to note that what could have and should have been neutral, fact, and inquiry-based discussions of these heated topics, and instead heavily imposes one-party line to the exclusion of scientific inquiry or even fact. So for this reason, a nonprofit and several parents have sued Kansas for adopting those standards. Their contention is that the standards impose a religious understanding upon all children, which of course trespasses against constitutional barriers to government-imposed religion. So practically speaking, these standards not only open Kentucky taxpayers to more lawsuits, but in terms of principle, I think we'd all agree that we don't want government through schools imposing religion on anyone. So it's better to get science standards that don't do that. So even brushing that dispute aside, the Next Generation Science Standards, NGSS, they're quite simply rotten science standards. Even the standards themselves say that they do not prepare students who want to go into STEM fields after high school. Here's a quote from those standards. NGSS does not define advanced work in the scientists. Students wishing to move into STEM fields should be encouraged to follow their interests with additional coursework. And it's far worse than that, though, as Kentuckian Martin Copper wrote in the Lexington Herald Leader. In NGSS, climate and weather issues are apparently more important than gravity, photosynthesis, electricity, genetics, radiation, and quantum mechanics. Genes are mentioned 38 times, the solar system 23 times, DNA 16 times, oxygen 16 times, and so forth. Meanwhile, the terms climate, weather, and global warming are together mentioned more than 130 times. A Thomas B. Fordham Institute analysis of the standards by several prominent scientists finds that NGSS omits an astonishing number of essential science content, including almost all math, much of high school chemistry and high school physics, and a variety of smaller but key concepts such as simple electrical circuits, acids and bases, and chemical formulas. In fact, the reviewers say there is so little advanced content that it would be impossible to derive a high school physics or chemistry course from the content included in NGSS. 15 states and national and international organizations already offer clearly superior science standards for courses. Why can't Kentucky pick one of those or start with the best and see if it can be improved further? There is no good reason not to. Many of the same organizations that wrote the Next Generation Science Standards also wrote Common Core, and the two are designed to work together. We are repeatedly told that Common Core and NGSS are the products of state-led processes. That's supposed to make us feel better about the fact that they were incubated within private organizations unaccountable to the public, contrary to how states have always conducted the business of public education, because our laws rightly grant every citizen to have a voice in the policies that govern our lives. The U.S. Constitution guarantees this, as does the Kentucky Constitution. It says, for one, all power is inherent in the people and all free governments are founded on their authority. Representative government is the birthright of every American, and our leaders have sold it for the massive pottage called Common Core. Briefly, this is how Common Core subverts that birthright. Neither Kentucky nor federal law grants non-governmental organizations the power to create massive, far-reaching education mandates outside public purview. The National Governors Association and Chief Council of State School Officers, with their creation called Achieve Inc., created Common Core behind closed doors. They are private trade organizations and they have no legal right to write any public policy. In fact, both receive substantial funds from taxpayers through mostly federal grants and some state fees. Yet we're constantly told that Common Core is a state-led enterprise, but who is supposed to lead the states? Why, they're citizens, as the Kentucky Constitution says, not a shadow government comprised of nonprofits not subject to open records and open meetings laws, and whose members are nowhere near elected or appointed by taxpayers and voters, and who are not required to explain who made what decisions and why. I've heard some folks insist that Kentucky teachers got to submit comments in Common Core and thereby were involved in the process. This is a farce. Although Common Core shepherds requested public comments, they never published them or responded to them publicly, which is typically mandatory for public rulemaking. Not one Kentuckian appears on the list of 135 contributors to Common Core, and Common Core contributors were required to sign confidentiality agreements. I spoke with several of these folks, and they told me that they had no idea what influence their comments had on the final product, since the standards lead writers were completely in control of that process. Some said that the lead writers entirely ignored their suggestions, and 2 of those 5 lead writers had never written education standards before, and none of them have ever been K-12 teachers. And none of them, of course, were from Kentucky or in any way beholden to Kentucky's people or granted any legal authority to make any decision for the state. Anyone who presumes to say that this in any way befits government of the people, by the people, and for the people has no idea what those words mean. Kentucky's education boards apparently had to pass Common Core to find out what was in it, because they adopted the standards a full month before even the first draft was publicly available. That meeting was February 10th, 2010, and the first draft of Common Core published on March 10th, 2010. The final version of Common Core, which was significantly different from that draft, was published on June 2nd, 2010, about a week after Kentucky had promised the federal government that it had adopted a sight unseen Common Core in an attempt to get federal rates to the top line. So Kentucky taxpayers, parents, and even decision makers had no way of knowing what their state was promising to do to its education system, and it apparently didn't matter to those who decided. The state's relationship with the National Common Core Testing Organization, called the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers, or PARC, also subordinates taxpayers and their duly elected representatives to a set of unelected bureaucrats inside a private nonprofit. Kentucky's Memorandum of Understanding with PARC commits the state to, quote, address barriers in state law, statute, regulation, or policy to implementing the proposed assessment system. The products coming out of this centrally planned, undemocratic process are, not surprisingly, nothing anyone should be proud to offer children. I'll let the others discuss the academic ineptitude of Common Core, and instead we'll discuss the existing and future problems with its tests. The first is cost. So even if we accept the estimate of per-student testing costs from Kentucky's current testing overlord, PARC, they're guessing that the tests will cost $29.50 per student. And so that number is $5.50 per student more than you currently pay for English and math tests in grades 3 through 9, according to both PARC and the nonpartisan Brookings Institution. So if you multiply that extra $5.50 by Kentucky's 262,000 students in grades 3 through 9, that will mean you have to find an extra $1.948 million somewhere every single year that you use to PARC. And that's, of course, if the cost estimate doesn't get revised up, as several testing experts have told me is likely. So that cost only gets the test shipped to the kids. It doesn't provide them the technology required to administer these all online tests. And the only independent estimate of technology costs for Kentucky to administer PARC tests comes out to approximately $110 million. That's a large part of that is an unfunded mandate from the state that will have to be paid by local taxpayers. Across the country, school districts are taking on additional debt to pay for computers for these tests, and the debt typically comes due years after the computer's relatively short life cycle. So in other words, computer lasts 3 to 5 years, the debt lasts 10 to 15 years, so you're still paying for something that is long gone after it's gone.
Ms. Pullmann, I just need to let you know you have 1 minute left.
All right. Then you have the technical difficulties with Common Core tests, and Kentucky has more experience with that than other states. If you remember last spring, your shiny new Common Core aligned tests that were supposed to preview the national tests failed singularly in that respect. The state found it could not score these open-ended questions quickly or cost-efficiently, so it told local districts to do so if they wanted, but none of those questions counted toward what test results are supposed to know. That, of course, changes an objective measure that applies to every student into a subjective measure, where some test questions apply in some schools but not in others. And as you may remember, the Kentucky Department of Education didn't see fit to inform the legislature of this until the news got out several months later. Kentucky has faced this problem since at least 1996 and still can't seem to get smoothly functioning open response items on tests. Maybe it's time to try something else, especially since PARC also plans to have states manually score their own student answers to constructive response questions.
Okay.
So the last area of concern with the tests, I'll just finish this sentence and I'll be finished,
Okay.
is that the contractual agreements that enter them into Kentucky also present dangers to student data privacy. So I understand I don't have time to get into that, but I'm happy to if some folks have questions later on.
Thank you so much.